This is the first of a 4-part series on hair covering. It is called The Mystical Meaning of Hair Covering. Most of this material is inspired by Rabbi Wolpe, Rosh Yeshiva of Meshech Chochmah in Johannesburg, here where I live. It is also inspired by just a general perspective that I've gotten from the Sefer Ohel Rachel. It is not intended as halachic instruction, it is a mystical shiur. We will see as we explore that in fact there is a difference between the halachic and the mystical approach to this subject. It is not intended as a reason for anybody to take on the mitzvah. Our subscription to the mitzvahs is on a naseh v'nishma basis, which means that once we trust Hashem in the mitzvahs He gives us, that they are for our ultimate betterment and good and harmony and happiness and spiritual health, then when we perform the mitzvah, we actually get the taste of the mitzvah. In Hebrew, the word taste is tam. Ta'am ha-mitzvah means the reason for the mitzvah. So that is my desire. I am sitting here today sharing this 4-part series with you with the tefillah that these words should make a deep impression on your neshama. They should help you in your fulfillment of the mitzvah, open your eyes, and awaken the delight in accessing the power that we have through the mitzvah. I would just like to add before I begin that, as it's discussed in Ohel Rachel, that whenever we start to speak about matters of Jewish womanhood, touching on matters of marriage, we have the challenge of opening our mind and stepping out of a humanistic expectation or humanistic law, logical way of thinking, and stepping into the divine logic, into spiritual law. So bear that in mind as we begin. What I'd like to do is give you some of the basic halachic groundwork, and we'll move to some of the core mystical teachings. The purpose of the first session today is to get that grounding and to think about it and use it as a way to become curious about what deeper implications are hidden in this material. Part 2, we will then begin to delve into the essence of the mystical teaching, and it will unlock these questions, please God. So the first source, the most basic source, where do we find hair covering for women in the Torah? The first place is in the undoing of a marriage, actually, in the Gemara in Ksuvas. And it says, and you're going to have to put on your spiritual law thinking ability here, it says that a woman who does not cover her hair according to the Torah law, a man is able to divorce her even without a ksuba. She even loses what should have come to her upon their separation. Now this is very upsetting, but it does indicate that there is some primal problem with this woman who is not covering her hair and somehow spiritually undermines the sanctity of their marriage. So what exactly does this mean? You know, the other examples brought down in this Gemara is if she doesn't keep those mitzvot which enable her husband to live a Torah life. For example, family purity and challah. And then it brings the example of her not covering her hair as on a level that also is grounds for this unfortunate situation. So just to summarize our question here is why, in what way is hair covering or failure to do so some sort of spiritual diffusion, some sort of breach on the basis on what the whole marriage is built? Question 2, source 2, is what is the Torah source of a woman covering her hair, you might be surprised to learn that it doesn't say explicitly, but rather we learn it from the negative space. What do I mean? Is that in the description of the Sota woman, again, a tragic situation where there's a gross misdemeanor and a loss of marital holiness, the woman is suspected to have secluded herself with another man. Whether or not they committed the act of infidelity needs to be ascertained. She goes to the Beis HaMikdash and she undergoes the procedure that is done to the Sota woman, involving taking Hashem's name and blotting it out and ingesting this mixture, if I remember correctly, and all kinds of physical things that happen to her that indicate whether or not she was guilty. Really a tragic situation. But part of that procedure, as it says, upara as rosh ha'isha, that they shall uncover, they shall expose the woman's hair. And this was obviously symbolic, as you can imagine, but really a humiliation. It was a midah keneged midah. It was a measure for measure, that in some way she left the holiness of her marriage to seclude herself with this other man, and measure for measure her hair is exposed. So this is really an interesting place to learn out this halacha, this mitzvah. It is absolutely d'oraisa from the Torah. But what also emerges in looking at that original source is that the fact that the Torah didn't even ever say explicitly, but we learn it and we derive it from the fact that her hair covering is removed, tells us that there's something very natural, according to spiritual law, for a Jewish woman to cover her hair. And not only that, but it's part of her dignity, because by uncovering it, it was a degradation, it was a humiliation for her. So were we to be aligned with spiritual law, intrinsically this would be obvious to us. So there's our second question, is why is it that according to spiritual law, a woman's covering of her hair makes total sense? The third halachic source that I'll share with you is where are the oral tradition based on the Torah source of the Sota woman, para es rosh ha'isha. The oral tradition gives us all the parameters halachically, what needs to be covered, when, where, all the details. And where does the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral tradition, do that? It is interestingly enough, not in any section called modesty or woman's covering of hair, but it's actually inserted into the section of the halachas of Kriyas Shema, the laws of the recitation of Shema. And it says that a man who is facing a woman whose hair should be covered is not allowed to say Shema, and in fact all blessings are not allowed to be made in front of this exposed hair. So there we have our third question, is why are we learning the details of these halachot, these laws, from the context of prayer, from the context of the saying of Shema? It really is counterintuitive. Shouldn't it deserve its own section? Obviously, it has some sort of connection to prayer, to this spiritual relationship we have with our Creator through prayer. So those are the three halachic sources, just to give us the groundwork. Now we're going to be looking at the mystical sources, and we're going to see that things actually are going to split. The halachic sources have their parameters, and there are certain leniencies, and as I said, that isn't the intention of my class today. But the Kabbalistic root, the mystical roots, is coming at it from a different angle, and actually comes out much stronger than even those halachic sources. So here are a few of them, as I heard them from Rabbi Wolpe. The first one is in Parshas Beha'aloscha, and it's very interesting that it is this source is a description of the preparation of those that used to do the service in the Beis HaMikdash. So we know that there were two camps, so to speak, two groups, and they each played their role, both beautiful, very different. There were the Kohanim, who did the service in the Beis HaMikdash, and then there was another group called the Leviim, and they had their role. And this description in Va'aloscha says the following. It says under the words from the Torah, Kach es ha-Leviim, take the Leviim. It's an instruction to the Kohanim to take the Leviim. So how do you take someone? Obviously, it doesn't mean you pick them up and move them where you want them. But Rashi says you coax them, you persuade them, you bring them with words. And this is actually beautiful to realize that all of us, we want to come into our service of Hashem. We want to achieve our potential. We want to bring Kedusha, holiness, to the world. We want to build Torah homes. But we all need to be taken. We all need a little bit of warmth, words to draw us in. And we'll see that the Leviim needed it to be done by the Kohanim. So what did they do? Is they drew them in with words. They said, how great are you? How fortunate are you to be involved in this service? And then they had to be purified. They needed to undergo a tahara process. What was this process? Very interesting, is they needed a razor, needed to pass over their hair. They needed to be shaved. So this is a little different than hair covering, but it is this involvement with, in this case, the total removal of hair for the Leviim, which was done in order to ready them for their service. Then the next thing that would be done is the Kohanim would actually, we were joking before about not literally taking them, but they would actually literally, physically wave them, pick them up and wave them. And this was all part of getting them ready. So this is really not humanistic at all. It is divine, and it is very hard to relate to what was going on over there. So listen to what the Zohar says on the point of the shaving, and we'll speak about the waving in a little bit. And of course you're thinking, what does this have to do with hair covering? Hang in tight, we'll get there. So the Zohar says, Mishom shehem mizroa small. Because the Leviim come from the left side. Totally incomprehensible unless you have prior Kabbalistic knowledge, I know that. What is the left side? The left side is called the side of Gvura or Din. V'tzad Hadin. So what is this left side about? So the Leviim, as I mentioned, were part of a group, and the Kohanim were the other, and the two of them together formed the people in the temple that used to perform the service in the Beis HaMikdash. One of them was from the right, and one of them was from the left. What does that mean? So before we go ahead, I'll just basically explain that the human being is created b'tselem Elokim. And if we have a right hand and a left hand, it is because we are created in the image of God, and God, even though He is not corporeal, has a right hand, so to speak, and a left hand. What that means is that He has two attributes which He uses to interact with the world, to create the world and to interface and interact with it. He has the outstretched right arm, as we learn about in the story of the Exodus, and that we say at the Pesach Seder, He took us out with an outstretched arm of strength, of compassion, of love, of kindness. And then He has a left hand. And the left hand, you know, if you've heard of this concept before, we often think of it as negative, as difficult, as something undesirable. It's the left hand is the hand of judgment, it's the hand of din. And obviously we know that if there was only a right hand, if there wasn't a hand of judgment, then we wouldn't be accountable for our choices, for our actions, and that wouldn't be the highest order of kindness, because then we wouldn't have a way to, as our sources teach us, to earn the goodness that is waiting for us in the next world and in this world. There wouldn't be free will. So there needs to be a world where there's a pull between good and evil, dark and light, where there is this potential to do the wrong thing, the potential to be held accountable. And that means that when we do the right thing, there is incredible reward. So it's actually an expression of the highest good. But in any event, these two hands on Hashem's part are always working together. So too, as we reflect Hashem in our parenting, in our marriages, in all our interactions, if there was only the kindness, the expansion of heart, the magnanimity, then there wouldn't be the boundaries, and people have negative associations with that word as well. But we're going to see that the boundaries enable the giving to reach the right place at the right time, withholding the respect of the recipient. So in fact, they're both part of the kindness story. They're both part of love, but they're two different aspects which work in tandem. So going back to the Beis HaMikdash, going back to the Zohar, what does it mean that the Levi is on the side of the left hand, the side of judgment, of din? And we can derive from here that the Kohanim, if the Levi was on the left, the Kohanim was on the right, the side of Chesed. So I'm going to hold off with more explanation until part 2. I want to make sure we've got our sources down and our questions clear, and please God, we'll come back to it shortly. So carrying along in the Zohar, Kol mi shaba mitzad hadin, whoever comes from the left side, whoever somehow embodies this left-hand energy, this quality of din, which we need to explain much more, tzarech shelo yigdal seyar. It is necessary for him spiritually not to grow his hair. This is talking about the Levi. Mishum shemar bedin ba'olam. Were the Levi not to shave, were they to grow their hair, it would bring about excessive din, excessive judgment to the world. Now the Zohar goes on, and the Zohar makes a comparison to the woman being on the left side as well, aligned with the Levi, which is actually a beautiful key to us, because if we could unlock a little bit of what a Levi's role was and how he related to his hair in the case of shaving, and I'm not inferring that a woman should shave her hair at all, but if we could unlock the key of the Levi, then we can understand the feminine. Lefichach isha ke'ein zeh, a woman comes from that same place. Tzricha shelo yisra'eh saraseha l'chutz. And it is necessary for her spiritually that her hair should not be exposed to the outside world. Utzricha lechasos rosha. And it's necessary for her to cover her head, ulechasos sa'aroseha, to cover her hair. And then it says a remarkable thing. Va'az misbarchin kol elu. In this way, the Levi achieves the ultimate good according to his role, which is, as we'll see, a beautiful role. And the women as well receive bracha, those that come from the side of din, through this sort of curtailing or containing. In the case of the Levi, shaving; in the case of the woman, covering. They transform the potential for an overabundance of din into total blessing. How much power is in that? If we know how to use this energy as we'll need to still define it, we will then know how to access this power and use it appropriately. Va'al ken kasuv b'Leviim Ko taseh lehem letaharam. This is how they achieve purification. Interesting to note that the side of the left, they are very directly linked to the concept of purity, tahara, taharat mishpacha, as you're thinking along the woman's lines, whereas the side of the Kohanim, which is also incidentally the side of the masculine, is the side of kedusha, of holiness. So keep that in your mind as we go through. Now it goes on and speaks about the waving. V'lamadnu shehalevim enam olim limkomam. The Leviim are not brought up to their place. Ad sheyanifu asam hakohen, until the Kohen waves them. Mishum shehayamin manhig tamid as hasmol. This is a rule, a spiritual law here that we are learning, because the right hand, in order to create a world, a spiritually healthy world, the right hand always needs to guide the left. And so it is with our hands. Majority of people are right hand dominant, and the right hand guides the left hand, and they work together. Similarly, there's a lot of science about the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and right brain dominant people are very linear. The science goes verbal, mathematical, whereas the left brain people are, I hope I'm not mixing it around. I'm mixing it around. It's interesting, so interesting. It doesn't align with this Kabbalistic teaching. It's flipped. So whereas the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, the right side is actually the non-linear. It's the lateral, and the left side is the linear, and then it flips in the body. But at any event, we see that half a brain is nowhere as powerful as a whole integrated brain. So the goal here is that the Kohen should be directing the left, and this is not a diminishment or a lack of importance of the left, but it creates a sum that's the sum is greater than all of the parts. So carrying along, the next part is definitely something I'm not even going to say until we get to our next session. Avalanim shachim, so this is the part next. Those that follow along the right come from the side of Kedusha, and that, incidentally, with hair has the exact opposite operating system. So whereas those coming from the left-hand side, I really hope I haven't lost you, but those coming from the left-hand side, the side of judgment, they says the Zohar, it's necessary for them to shave as for the Levium, or cover for women their hair. However, when you go to the side of the right, so now we're going to be talking about men vis-a-vis women, or Kohanim vis-a-vis Levium, something very interesting happens with the hair. What happens over there? Continues the Zohar. Hu lehefech, it's the opposite. Shehasa'arot bahem kodesh. Their hair is holy, doesn't need the tahara that the left side needs, but they are holy. And that is why you have the case of the Nazir, that he grows his hair and leaves it unshorn, and it is a great sign and great spiritual strength to him. And in part 3 of this series, I would actually like to go through Tanakh with this information and see how it plays out in the fascinating unfolding of events of a Nazir like Shimshon and many other examples. Please God. So that is the first source from the Zohar. Quite a lot to digest. Just to summarize our question is, what on earth does hair have to do with being on the left or the right side of your spiritual mission? So we will get to this, please God, in the next class. The next source comes from the Zohar, Parshas Naso. And you know, people love mystical classes generally, mystical Torah. It is so nourishing for the deep part of our neshama. The world needs it, as it was always, the Kabbalistic tradition was always the most private, and it requires so much respect, being the innermost core of our Torah. And great people, Rav Moshe Shapiro and others, have been teaching Torah, drawing from this mystical side of Torah, because our souls need it. It is Ikvasa de Mashiach, and this is what we're doing. This is what's happening. So people love it, but on the other hand, we're going to find that as we tap into just this tiny little bit of mystical teaching, it is quite strict. It is quite, it is so, the understanding of what's happening in hair covering is so powerful that it causes the adherence to the practice of it to be even more strict. So I would like you to understand, as I'm giving this over to you, please consult with your Rav. Halacha is much more lenient, to know exactly what the parameters are. And then the mystical side of this teaching really just outlines potential for tremendous growth, and I hope inspiration, please God. So what is this next source with that introduction? From Parshas Naso Isha, Hamotzia misaros rosha lechutz lehisyafos bo. So a woman who decides consciously to reveal some of her hair, doesn't even say all, some, because she feels it brings her beauty. So really what she's doing is she's tapping into a physical beauty, and we can't blame her, but she's missing this spiritual beauty of why the Torah instructs a woman to cover her hair. And the Zohar informs us what actually happens. A woman that doesn't know this, Goremes anios lebesa, she causes three things to her home. The first one is poverty. It's definitely spiritual poverty, but physical, financial poverty. They don't enjoy abundance. They live with constant financial pressure. Goremes shebaneha lo yiyu chashuvim bador. She brings about a lack of success to her children, that whatever their children do, they won't ever be considered successful in their generation, in contrast to their peers. V'goremes davar acher sheyashre b'bayis, and she causes this other anonymous thing to take root in their household. Says the commentary, what is this other thing that none of us would want? It's tsaras. What this means in our generation, I don't know. We don't generally see tsaras, but it is a spiritual reality. And when the cloak of the physical world were to be removed, we would see these things. Mi garam lekol zeh. Who caused all of this? These three things that no woman wants in her home. God forbid. Hainu se'ar hahu. It is that hair. Shenir'eh mirosh lechutz, that was visible from her head to the outside. Uma b'bayis kach. And if this is the case within her home, kol sheken bashuk. How much more so in the marketplace? So it's really quite an eye-opener to read this. Just delineating the potential of how great a woman can try in order to cover her hair, even in her home, in order to, in this case, prevent these calamities. But I'd like to take you to the story of Kimchis. The story of Kimchis you've all heard, I'm sure. I will repeat it here, just to sharpen our question. So in the tractate Yuma, Tanu Rabbanan, we are taught, Shivim banim hayula lekimchis. I'll read this in English just to save time for us. That Kimchis had 7 sons, and all of them were successful beyond her wildest dreams, or maybe according to her wildest dreams. That's probably the case. And they served as high priests in the temple in the Beis HaMikdash. So here we are going back to the Kohanim in the temple. We're going to have to tie some of these themes together. So the sages said, why did she merit? I mean, one Kohen Gadol, two, but all of them, 7 Kohanim Gadolim in the Beis Hamikdash. What was her merit? Why did she merit that? So they asked her, and she said, what did you do that you deserved that? And she actually knew, and she said, Mi amai lo ra'u korus beisi kla'ei sa'ari. The walls of my house never saw my hair. So this is an individual. It is not, this is, as I said, not halachic guidance, but we want to understand what is the connection between Kimchas covering her hair and the blessing she got in the temple. The next source I have here, I've got 2 left. The second to last one is from a Gemara in Sanhedrin, and it is also very important key for us to understand this whole fascinating topic, and that is the contrast, the story of what happened in the time of Korach. If you remember, Korach was being inaugurated for his Leviah, to be a Levi in the Mishkan during the time of Moshe. Moshe was the leader of the Jewish people. Moshe had appointed upon Hashem's tzivoy command Aharon, his brother, to be the first Kohen Gadol, the first high priest. And what happened in this situation is that the following scenario unfolded. So now we're going to get into what happened with their women, with their wives, and we're going to see the incredible power of women vis-a-vis their husbands. So Korach came home, and I want you to picture the scene. He's sitting in his living room, whatever the living room looked like in those days, in the tent. And Korach's wife said to him, you know, how was your day in the temple? How was the inauguration? How was your day at the Beis HaMikdash? In the Mishkan. And he started telling her the facts. He said, you know, Aaron is the Kohen Gadol, and you can't believe how beautiful those Bigdei Kahuna are. Those priestly clothing, garments, they are exquisite. And then she said, and what happened to you? You know, you're looking a little scarce on the hair side. And he had been shaven and he was bald. And he felt tremendous shame sitting across his wife and realizing that he wasn't as important as Aaron because he got beautiful ornate clothing and he got shaved. So his wife egged him on and fueled the fires of a rebellion, which then ensued. So let's switch from that tent to another tent, to the tent of a man by the name of On ben Peles. And he had come home, and his wife had said to him, how was your day? And he told her that Korach, maybe this wasn't exactly on the same day, but Korach had started a rebellion, and his main complaint was Va'amech kulam tzadikim, that everybody is holy, kulam kadoshim, everybody deserves a chance to shine. Nobody should be the leader and appoint their brother to be the high priest and make it a family political situation and exclude others. We all deserve to be acknowledged for our holiness. And Korach went on to describe, you know, if you had a base medrash, a study hall filled with holy books, does it need a mezuzah? Does it need a scroll on the door? On the door, the whole room is holiness. And if you have a tzitzis that is totally tchelet, totally holy and designated in service of Hashem, why do you need the tassels? And this was his complaint. Why must there be a leader? Why must there be a hierarchy? We're all holy. We all deserve to shine. And On fell into this persuasion, and he told his wife that he was going to be joining his company. And his wife was a very brilliant woman. She knew her power and she knew how to wield it. And she said to him, you know, On, I don't really understand you. Whether you are the disciple of Moshe, who was God appointed, or the disciple of Korach, who is creating this uprising, either way, you're just a disciple. What's in it for you? You might as well get with the right people, join the right club, stick with the truth. On didn't know what to do. He said, I've already committed, I've signed up. She said, leave it to me, I'm going to help you. And indeed, the Gemara says, Ishto Hatzilaso, his wife, saved him from a certain fate. And she gave him wine and she put him to sleep. And while he was intoxicated, she did the most fascinating thing that we can't not look at, given our discussion today. She took off her hair covering and she let down her hair. And when all of these holy men, indeed they were holy, when the congregants of Korach's camp came to collect On, to go to do the uprising and to rebel, they saw On's wife defiling herself in such a way, exposing her hair at their front door. And they recoiled in horror, and they left On alone. Sure enough, the story unfolded. The earth opened up, swallowed them into Gehenna, and On woke up. And the Gemara concludes with a story, and it contrasts Korach's wife, who was so upset about his being shaved, and On's wife, who went and exposed her hair. So we're dealing with the Levi and the woman, the shaving of the Levi, the covering of the woman's hair. They both of these were the cause of the destruction in the case of Korach and the salvation in the case of On. So my question is, what did the wife of On know about the secret power of hair, the mystical meaning of hair covering, of hair, that the wife of Korach, unfortunately, didn't know? The Gemara finishes and it says, Chachmas nashim bansa besa, the wisdom of a woman builds her home, ve'iveles beyadeha teharsena, and a wicked woman, really, it's not even, it is wicked, but it's a foolish woman. She's misinformed, she doesn't get it. With her own hands, tears down her home. So what is the secret of hair covering? I will just conclude with a final source from the Zohar in Korach, and it says the most fascinating thing. It says that actually the name Korach in Hebrew means, or in Aramaic from the Zohar, Reshe below Saira. It means a head without hair. It means bald. It is the quintessential Levi. And if Korach would have known his essence and what shaving of his hair would mean for his spiritual success, he would have reached the greatest heights and been the greatest Levi, and together with Moshe and Aaron would have been a key player, instrumental in bringing down Hashem's holiness to the Mishkan and his presence and protection to the people. And in this vein, I'll end with a prayer. I hope that I have gotten you a little bit curious about what is the incredible energy, what is the ta'am, the reason, the taste, the experience that we can tap into and allow it to resonate with us as truth, and use that in part as a vehicle to bring down Hashem's presence into our homes and to bring down joy and fulfillment into our marriages. I'll see you on the next video.